What if everything you see is a projection molded by where you choose to look? What if reality doesn't unfold until your gaze tells it to? That concept alone, just that seed, is enough to detonate everything you've ever assumed about the world around you. Not in a theoretical someday, but in this exact breath. Because once this lands, your entire framework for what's real begins to disintegrate. We're trained to believe we walk through a finished landscape, a world already carved, chiseled, and painted in detail, waiting passively for us to explore it. But what if the opposite is true? What if the world only takes shape when you lock eyes with it? Not figuratively, but literally. And what if the versions of yourself, every possible outcome, every version of your story, already exist waiting in the wings, hoping you'll point your focus like a sword and give one of them the power to rise? The science has been screaming this for years, and yet most people continue to live like it's optional knowledge. They read the headlines, they nod at the experiments, then they carry on pretending the ground beneath their feet isn't shifting with every decision they make. At the quantum level, things aren't things at all. They're flickers, possibilities, ghosts of matter that refuse to become solid until you decide they're real. These aren't metaphors. This is the raw structure of the universe. Particles behave like ripples in a lake, everywhere, every direction, until your attention causes them to snap into a single version of themselves. It's not you detecting what's already there. It's you creating it by the act of witnessing. So now imagine this. There are infinite copies of you, each living a completely different life. One version becomes everything you've ever dreamed of. Another never gets started. A third collapses under fear. They're all real, but none are fully alive until you choose one and keep choosing it, like hitting save on a simulation, while the rest fade into non-existence. This is the fork where most people get lost. They wake up and immediately replay the old track. They scan the day for what's wrong. They feed the machine with worry, repetition, failure, and familiar fear, not because they want it, but because it's habitual. And in doing so, they resurrect the same reality again and again, reinforcing it like muscle memory. They don't understand the weight of their attention. They think they're reacting to life, not realizing they're authoring it moment by moment, with every flicker of focus. Every moment you zero in on what you hate, what you lack, what never seems to change, you're not just identifying it. You're selecting it. You're collapsing that timeline into solid ground while every other option evaporates around it. You want to escape that loop? Then stop acting like a spectator. You are not the audience. You are the one holding the camera, the one with final cut privileges. And whether you point that lens toward dread or desire will determine everything that comes next. Most won't follow through. They'll hear these words, maybe feel a spark, and then vanish back into the noise. They'll blame the world when things don't shift. But if you're still here, if you're listening this deeply, your next thought has the power to rewrite the entire script. Let's break this even further. You've probably heard about the double slit experiment. Maybe you filed it away as a quirky science fact, but it's much more than that. It's a direct reflection of your daily life. In that experiment, tiny particles are sent toward a barrier with two openings. If no one observes, the particles act like waves, fluid, dispersed, infinite. But the second someone watches, those waves collapse. The particle chooses a path. It becomes a singular reality. This is not just lab tech. This is happening every second inside your mind, every situation you face, every version of your day, every crossroads where you pick one lens, one reaction, one belief. Your attention is the trigger that turns one ghost into stone and lets all the others dissolve. Right now, there's a version of your future where you rise, where you break patterns, where your life explodes in color. And there's one where you cave to inertia, where the days blur, where the story never turns. The field holds them all, but only one gets solid, the one you dare to observe with focus so sharp the other options can't survive. And if you're wondering why life feels stuck, it's probably not because reality is against you. It's because you've become an expert in choosing the same script, the same version of you, every single day. And every single day, you keep choosing to believe that version is all there is. It doesn't matter if it's heartbreak, failure, disappointment, fear. If you look for it, it grows roots. And if you ignore what's possible, it dies unborn. That's not metaphysics. That's physics. Here's the hard truth. If you don't make the choice, something else will. And it won't pick in your favor. Chaos doesn't dream for you. The algorithms, the institutions, the culture, they'll hand you a story. And if you're not awake enough to reject it, you'll mistake it for your own. Look at your life. Why did one person come through a crisis and build something unstoppable while another collapsed? Same storm, different observer. The one who rose wasn't braver, luckier, or more connected to the stars. They just pointed their awareness toward the smallest crack of light and refused to look away. Meanwhile, the other became a scholar in their own pain. They built altars to the things they lost. Their focus became a tomb. You do the same thing all the time. You zoom in on one thing and everything else fades out. You give it heat. You give it breath. You give it meaning. And soon that becomes your world. Not because it's the most true, but because it got the most air time in your head. So what are you spotlighting on repeat? What reality do you reinforce every morning with your first thought? Every afternoon when you zone out? Every night when you lay in bed rehearsing a scene that already happened? You don't need to chase change. You need to track your attention, because if your perception stays the same, nothing else will ever move. Here's the most sobering part. The universe doesn't care if your focus is positive or negative. It doesn't measure worthiness. It just echoes back the signal you broadcast. Not your wishes, not your declarations, but your real visceral attention. Most people don't see this because their life runs on autopilot. They wake up already absorbed in the next crisis. They scroll, they stress, they chase, they replay. Then they call it realism. They think they're navigating life, but they're just reenacting it. They didn't choose these scripts. They were installed by family, society, trauma, headlines, and every repetition makes the groove deeper until even their dreams are shaped by fear. You're not just reacting to life, you're collaborating with it, and that partnership begins every time you decide what to pay attention to. The entire culture is engineered to hijack this process. Social media, the 24-hour news cycle, marketing algorithms, they don't just distract you. They reprogram your observer. They flood the system with fear and urgency and dopamine hits so that all you see is noise. And once millions of people start staring at the same thing, anxiety, outrage, scarcity, that focus becomes a global mirror. The field adapts. The world rearranges to reflect the most consistent story. It doesn't matter if that story is helpful or toxic. If enough eyes are locked on it, it becomes real. Just like that, possibility shrinks. Your choice is narrow. You forget what freedom ever felt like. But here's the rescue rope. The moment you become aware of the mechanism, it loses power. You catch yourself. You pause. You shift. Suddenly you're not sleepwalking. You're not just the audience anymore. You're one of the rare few holding the remote. It won't be easy. It's not glamorous. It won't feel like fireworks. But if you can maintain even a single thread of new focus, long enough to override the loop, then a different world begins to form. Quietly, relentlessly. And that's where everything changes. not with chaos, not with force, but with sustained, consistent awareness. That's the lever the world can't resist. That's the unshakable presence that reshapes reality from the inside out. The mirror only reflects what you're willing to project. And most of the time, you don't even know you're the one sending the signal. Start with your patterns. What repeats? What always seems to go wrong in the same way? It's not punishment. It's resonance. It's your most practiced frequency, looping back with precision. And no, this isn't some cosmic test. It's just feedback. Raw, mechanical, emotionless reflection. You want a new image? Change the lens. Trying to fix the outside world while keeping your inner focus the same is like rearranging your reflection in the mirror and wondering why your face won't smile. It never works that way. The hard part isn't effort. It's ownership. It's looking yourself dead in the eye and saying, "This isn't happening to me. It's happening through me. And if I want to shift the story, I have to shift the gaze." That's the line most never cross. But once you do, there's no going back. There comes a point where you stop asking the world to change and begin questioning the lens you've been using to view it. And in that moment, everything you thought was immovable starts to shift. Because perception isn't a window, it's a filter. And most people never stop to examine what it's made of. They say they want peace, but they rehearse chaos. They say they want love, but they brace for betrayal. They repeat mantras about abundance, but their bodies vibrate with fear every time they check their bank account. And the field listens, not to their hopes, but to their consistency. The quantum world doesn't take orders. It doesn't obey declarations. It responds to the resonance you live in day after day. And that resonance isn't crafted through willpower or noise. It's built from alignment, that subtle, precise harmony between thought, feeling, and expectation. Think of it like tuning an instrument. If one string is off, the whole song warbles. You can shout your desires all day, but if your emotion doesn't match, if your expectations undercut every intention, the signal breaks apart before it even reaches the field. What you get back is fuzz, static, confusion. That's why so many people work so hard and see so little movement. They're not misaligned because they're lazy. They're misaligned because they've never been taught how to become internally coherent, to have their actions, beliefs, and emotional energy pointed in the same direction. The truth is, most people want transformation to be fast, dramatic, and external. A lottery ticket, a savior, a big break. But the real shift happens in silence, in those private moments when no one's watching and you choose again and again to hold a vision your current reality doesn't yet support. That choice, that invisible act of faith, is what triggers the field. Not desperate energy, not performative hustle, but clear, repeated alignment. A calm, steady pulse that the universe can mirror without distortion. You've probably noticed this before, but didn't have the language for it. Those weird coincidences. The moment something clicks without reason, the instant you stop needing a thing, and suddenly it shows up. These aren't anomalies, they're signals. Proof that the field is sensitive not to effort, but to coherence. And coherence doesn't mean pretending you're fine. It means feeling the tension and not flinching, witnessing your fear and not becoming it. You don't need to erase doubt, you need to outfocus it. That's where the silent observer enters, the version of you that doesn't panic when things look chaotic, the part of you that can sit, breathe, and still hold the original vision, even when nothing in the outside world seems to support it. That's not detachment, that's mastery. Most people try to manifest with noise. They shout affirmations, chase goals, overload their senses with motivation. But energy that's frantic can't hold a clear signal. The field doesn't read volume, it reads vibration. Imagine someone screaming, "I'm not afraid," while their body shakes, their eyes dart, their breath shortens. The words say one thing, the signal says another, and the field reflects the signal every time. That's why clarity is so rare. It requires stillness in a world addicted to speed. It requires presence when everything around you is demanding reaction. And it requires the courage to choose your attention with the precision of a surgeon, not the randomness of a scroll. Now let's take it deeper. Who exactly is choosing that attention? Is it the surface mind? The voice that narrates your day, reacts to triggers, replays your past? Or is there something deeper, the watcher behind the voice? Every time you hear your own thoughts and recognize them as thoughts, who's listening? When you catch yourself spiraling into an old belief and step back, who is doing the stepping? That question opens the gate to a truth most people never discover. The identity you walk around with, the personality, the stories, the emotional patterns, isn't you. It's just a mask, a costume the deeper awareness wears to experience a specific version of the world. Eastern mystics have taught this for centuries, and now even neuroscience agrees. The brain can split between the thinker and the observer. One creates the story, the other simply watches, and the real power belongs to the watcher. Because the moment you observe the mind instead of reacting through it, the loops begin to lose their grip. You stop being the puppet. You start becoming the programmer. From that vantage point, you see the world differently. You stop taking your thoughts as truth. You realize that identity is fluid, not fixed. That reality isn't one thing. It's a menu of potential outcomes waiting for your selection, and you begin to understand the game. Most people are stuck inside their own story, arguing with the plot, never realizing they could flip the page. They think the world needs to change, but what really needs to shift is where they stand inside themselves. Because the real observer, the one who can change the script, isn't bound by fear, ego, or habit. It's the awareness beneath all that, the spacious, calm presence that simply sees. And when you connect with that part of you, the chaos calms, the fear quiets, the timeline softens. You become the storm's eye, the place where possibility still lives. And this is where things start to bend, because once you stabilize that observer state, not once but consistently, the outer world begins to catch up. Not through magic, not through luck, but because the field is finally receiving a coherent, stable signal, one it can echo without distortion. Here's the hard part. Most people get there for a moment, then snap back. They taste alignment, but they don't stay. Why? Because they expect instant results. They hold the vision for 5 minutes, and when the world doesn't shapeshift immediately, they quit. They collapse back into doubt, and the loop begins again. But creation doesn't work on your deadline. It works on your consistency. The field isn't waiting to be impressed. It's waiting to be matched. Think of it like gravity. You don't need to understand it for it to work. You don't need to shout to activate it. You simply step off the edge and it responds. The quantum field is the same. Step into clarity and it shifts. Drift into contradiction and it stalls. You want real change? Hold the signal long enough for reality to catch up. That means tuning your thoughts, your emotions, your expectations, and your actions into one clear chord. Not once, repeatedly, until it becomes your new default. That's how you collapse a new version of your life into being. Not through effort, but through resonance. And here's the truth most people miss entirely. Your life isn't happening to you. It's being shaped through you. Every moment, every thought, every choice to focus on one thing instead of another is a vote for what becomes real. Most people waste those votes. They cast them for fear, for history, for habit, not because they want to, but because they've never realized they're voting at all. Look around. What patterns keep showing up? Are you always in survival mode? Always attracting the same relationships, the same arguments, the same ceilings? That's not coincidence. That's coherence. It's your dominant broadcast reflecting back through events, people, and circumstances. This isn't personal, it's physics. The field doesn't judge, it doesn't punish, it simply mirrors. So if your life feels like it's on repeat, maybe it's not the world that's stuck. Maybe it's your signal that never changes. Try flipping the lens. Instead of reacting to every frustration, track the emotion underneath. Instead of blaming the job, the partner, the city, observe the pattern that links them all. Because that's the echo, and you're the source. And when you shift the source, the echo changes. Not always instantly, but reliably. The mirror can only show what you bring to it. Change the image, and the reflection follows. This isn't easy work, but it is the only work that leads to lasting transformation. Not because it changes the world, but because it changes your relationship to it. And from that shift, everything else begins. Ask yourself, when life feels heavy, where is your focus? When the story seems stuck, what are you choosing to believe? When the mirror shows you something you don't like, do you blame the glass or change your stance? You always have a choice, even when you feel cornered, even when everything screams that you're trapped. There's always one move left. Adjust your focus, because in that shift, a new path emerges. You've been taught to chase, to hustle, to grind. But that's not how new worlds are born. They're born in quiet decisions, subtle redirections, invisible threads of attention that once held long enough turn into bridges to an entirely different life. So slow down, take stock, reclaim your observer. Ask not just, what do I want, but what am I feeding with my awareness? Because the second question holds the real key. You're always collapsing something into being. The only question is whether you're doing it by design or by default. This is where reality becomes a canvas again, where you stop being the effect and start becoming the cause, where you stop waiting and start observing on purpose, not just with your eyes, but with your entire system, with your breath, your posture, your energy, your stillness. Because the world is watching how you watch it, and it's adjusting accordingly. There's a quiet rebellion happening beneath the surface of your daily routine, and most people will never see it. It doesn't look like a revolution. There are no flags, no announcements, no parades, but it's there. In the moment you pause before reacting, in the instant you choose a new thought over the automatic one, in the space between stimulus and response, that's where the war for your life is being won or lost. You've been conditioned to believe that real change comes from big actions, dramatic shifts, loud declarations. But the deeper truth is this: your entire life pivots on what you're willing to notice. What you highlight with your awareness becomes solid. What you ignore begins to fade. And this isn't abstract. This is biological. Your nervous system is built to streamline input. It filters out what doesn't match your beliefs. It deletes what you've decided isn't relevant. It tunes your senses to track what your mind expects, which means your reality, what you call truth, is already curated by the lens you've been wearing your whole life. That lens is not neutral. It was shaped by your parents, your childhood, your culture, your pain. It was handed to you before you had the tools to examine it. And if you never stop to inspect it, you'll spend your life watching a projection instead of participating in the full spectrum of possibility. Here's where it gets wild. When you change what you're willing to focus on, you're not just rewriting your story. You're altering what's even available to be experienced. The future doesn't sit there waiting like a book you haven't read. It unfolds based on what you dare to observe long enough for it to solidify. That's why so many people live on loop. They keep scanning the world for threats, for patterns that confirm their fear. And in doing so, they collapse the same reality again and again. Not because it's all that exists, but because it's all they're tuned to see. Want to know how powerful this is? Run a simple test. Tomorrow morning, decide, just as a game, that you're going to find something new, not grand, just unfamiliar, something your usual day would blur past, and you'll see it. A new face, a strange coincidence, a tiny opportunity. It was always there, but your filter had no room for it. Now imagine doing this on purpose every day, not just with moments, but with your entire identity, who you think you are, what you expect to happen, what you assume the world will reflect back. If you change that filter, the world doesn't just look different, it becomes different. Because reality, as it turns out, is not a place you live in. It's a script you write in real time through your focus, and every page only appears after you choose what to read next. This is the observer effect, not as a theory but as a daily experience. And it's not just individual, it's collective. We live in a hive of consciousness, a massive field of overlapping attention. And every narrative we agree to observe together becomes the structure we all live within. Entire societies form around shared focus. Currencies, laws, religions, markets, they all begin as ideas held tightly enough by enough people that they harden into fact. And this is why your personal attention is never just yours. It's a contribution to the global lens. Every time you share a headline, repeat a story, nod along to a belief without questioning it, you're amplifying it. You're helping collapse that version of the world for everyone else too. That's the power nobody talks about. Not just manifesting for yourself, but becoming a responsible participant in the architecture of collective reality. Because look around, you can feel it. Entire cultures repeating the same fears. Social platforms looping outrage and despair. A planet full of eyes watching the same stories and unknowingly solidifying them into stone. You don't need a conspiracy to create mass hypnosis. You only need unchecked attention. And in that haze of repetition, new possibilities vanish. Not because they're impossible, but because no one is looking at them long enough for them to survive. But now you've seen the mechanism. You're aware. And that awareness is a superpower. It gives you the freedom to become a different kind of observer, one who doesn't feed the noise, who doesn't bow to inherited filters, who holds space for futures that no one else is brave enough to believe in. That kind of observer is rare. But when they show up, history bends. Because it only takes one coherent mind to introduce a new frequency into the system. One calm presence in a room of chaos. One person looking at the unthinkable and saying, what if this isn't the end, but the threshold? You can be that person, not by saving the world, but by saving your own lens, and refusing to collapse a future that doesn't feel alive to you. Start small. Begin with your morning. When you open your eyes, don't let the old script hijack your first thought. Don't reach for yesterday's worries. Ask yourself, what am I willing to see today that I've never seen before? And then watch, not just with your eyes, but with your presence. Let the moment teach you what you've been overlooking. Maybe it's beauty. Maybe it's timing. Maybe it's clarity. Whatever it is, hold it in your awareness longer than you hold the past. Because that holding, that focused attention, is the first brick in a new reality. But you'll be tested. The field doesn't challenge you. Life does. Old loops will try to suck you back in. Old pain will ask for your attention. You'll get pulled into arguments, distractions, the gravitational pull of everything familiar. And that's okay. The work isn't to never fall. It's to notice when you do. To catch yourself mid-scroll, mid-worry, mid-rage and ask, is this the world I want to give my energy to? Is this the reflection I want to harden? That moment of interruption is everything. It creates a gap. And in that gap, choice re-enters. Most people don't get that far. They fall into the loop and call it truth. But you've glimpsed behind the curtain. And once you see the strings, you don't unsee them. You either go back to pretending, or you pick up the pen and begin writing again. So write something new, not with ink, with intention, with observation, with courage. Hold a possibility so clearly that the rest of the world has no choice but to rearrange around it, even if you're the only one who sees it. That's not delusion. That's leadership. That's how revolutions begin. Not with crowds, but with a single observer who refuses to collapse the default timeline. Because every future you could ever want already exists, not in fantasy, but in potential, waiting for you to notice it, commit to it, and give it breath. And you will feel resistance, not because it isn't working, but because the old version of you is dying. The one who believed in limitation, the one who made excuses, the one who waited. That version will fight to stay alive. It will whisper doubt. It will point to your past. It will ask you to slow down. But don't listen. That voice belongs to the echo, not the source. You are the source, the awareness from which all else flows, the only one who decides what gets your attention and what fades into background noise. The universe does not build castles from your ambition. It builds them from your gaze, from where you choose to look again and again, especially when nothing has changed yet. And eventually, something will. The field will respond, subtle at first, then unmistakable. A stranger offers help, a plan clicks into place, a problem dissolves. You'll call it luck, coincidence, fate. But deep down, you'll know. It was the echo of your consistency, and you'll realize that reality isn't waiting for your effort. It's waiting for your focus. You don't need to fix your life. You need to witness something better long enough for it to become real. That's the art, not effort, not desperation, observation, clear, calm, repeated. So be the one who watches the new story, the one who holds it when no one else does, the one who says, I see a way through, even when there's no evidence yet. And one day, others will look at your life and call it magic. They'll ask how you did it. They'll ask what changed, and you'll smile because the answer will be simple. I saw it first. You've come this far, which means something inside you has already shifted. You may not have words for it yet, but a door has cracked open. You can feel the current pulling at your feet, even if the world around you looks the same. That quiet knowing, that's the field stirring. That's your signal being received. The illusion that you are just a bystander in your own story begins to dissolve when you realize your attention is the author's pen. And the second you stop outsourcing that pen to your past, to your habits, to the default stories everyone around you is collapsing, you begin to reclaim your power, not just to imagine, but to select. This isn't about force, not about bulldozing your way into a new life or shouting affirmations over a soundtrack of doubt. It's about subtle shifts in orientation, invisible pivots in awareness that when repeated, change your gravitational center. You become someone the world can't manipulate anymore, not because you resist harder, but because you're tuned to a different signal entirely. Now that you've seen how attention sculpts experience, how observation activates one timeline and lets others dissolve, the next step is calibration. Learning to feel in real time when your attention is aligned or fractured, when your thoughts and emotions are humming in harmony, or broadcasting mixed signals that confuse the field and stall momentum. This begins with radical honesty, not self-criticism, not shame, just precision. What are you actually focused on right now? Not what you say you want, but what your nervous system is rehearsing. Are you spinning in loops about what might go wrong? Are you recycling old wounds while telling yourself you've moved on? The field doesn't respond to your aspirations. It responds to your coherence. And the fastest way to check for coherence is through the body. Your body doesn't lie. It carries your frequency in the shape of your breath, the pace of your heart, the depth of your posture. You can speak abundance, but if your stomach is tight every time you open your banking app, you're still aligned with lack. You can visualize love, but if your chest clenches when someone gets close, you're still vibrating with fear. That's not failure, that's feedback. And once you learn to listen to it, you stop treating misalignment as evidence you're broken. You start treating it as information, a readout from the instrument panel of your inner world. You shift your attention inward. You ask, where is the friction? What emotion is coloring this focus? Am I witnessing possibility or bracing for disappointment? And if you feel that tension, good. That's the edge. That's the moment where the old signal is trying to hold you back and the new one is asking to be chosen anyway. That choice is the point of power. It's in those moments, tiny invisible moments, where you do what most never do. You stay, you breathe, you hold the vision without evidence, and you choose it again, and again, and again, not to force reality into submission, but to become the match to a version of the world that's already waiting for you, just out of reach. Most people never make it past that tension. They flinch, they reach for distraction, they scroll, complain, numb, overwork, rationalize. They say they're being realistic. But what they're really doing is protecting the old pattern. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Familiarity feels like safety, even when it's misery, even when it's costing you everything. And if you don't catch that reflex, if you don't interrupt that ancient code, it will keep collapsing the same loop over and over until your life becomes a museum of unrealized potential. But not you, because you're here, and you've seen behind the curtain. You've felt the moment where you could have spiraled into fear and didn't, where you could have defaulted to bitterness and paused instead. And in that pause, a new timeline flickered to life. It may not have fully arrived yet. You might still be surrounded by the echoes of the old world, but something has changed. You're no longer collapsing what you hate by accident. You're beginning to choose on purpose, and that's everything. But it gets deeper still, because now that you've reclaimed your lens, you begin to see that even your identity, your name, your story, your wounds, is not fixed. It's an interface, a costume worn by consciousness to experience a specific dimension. There's a you beneath your name, a you that existed before memory, before language, a field of awareness that isn't bound by what you've done or failed to do. This awareness doesn't get triggered. It doesn't take offense. It doesn't panic when the path looks unclear. It just watches, and in its presence, new possibilities bloom. The more you connect with this version of yourself, the silent witness behind every thought, the more fluid reality becomes. Because you've stepped out of the identity loop. You've stopped arguing with the mirror and started changing the reflection by changing the source. You'll start to notice it in small ways. People react differently to you, not because they've changed, but because your frequency has. Opportunities arise without chasing. Answers find you in moments of stillness. And your old life begins to dissolve, not with drama, but with quiet finality. That's when you know the code is bending. That's when you realize you're not waiting for the future anymore. You're already inside it. But don't get comfortable. This isn't a finish line. It's a threshold, and crossing it means accepting full authorship. No more blaming, no more delay, no more outsourcing your state to conditions. From this point forward, your world rises and falls on your awareness, and that responsibility is sacred. You'll be tested again. You'll feel the pull of old narratives. You'll get tired, distracted, disoriented. That's human. But now you have a map. You know where the control panel is. You know how to stop and ask, what am I feeding? What am I making real? Who's watching through my eyes right now? The witness or the wounded self? That self-inquiry is the practice. That inner audit is the ritual. And it's through that ritual that you become something rare, a conscious participant in your own becoming. Now zoom out one last time. Remember, this isn't just about your personal transformation. The observer effect doesn't stop at your skin. Every act of focused awareness contributes to the collective signal. Your alignment ripples outward. Your clarity shifts the field. Your refusal to collapse fear becomes a lighthouse others can navigate by. You may never see the full ripple, but it's there. One grounded observer in a chaotic crowd can shift the whole room. One coherent signal held through turbulence becomes a stabilizer for the entire timeline. That's why this matters. Not just for you, but for the world. Because the world doesn't need more outrage. It doesn't need more reaction. It needs more silent observers. People willing to collapse beauty, peace, truth, and potential, even when no one else is watching. People like you. You came here looking for something. Maybe you didn't know what. Maybe you thought it was a trick of the algorithm. But the truth is, you called this moment into being. You summoned this reflection because some deeper part of you was already shifting, already watching for a sign, already reaching for a new frequency. And now you have it. This isn't just a message. It's a mirror. So what will you reflect? What version of the world are you ready to collapse into being? Because the moment you decide, the field listens, and it answers with precision. You are no longer the echo. You are the origin. Hold the signal and watch what forms.